This is a quick summary. Believe it or not, we are talking about weeks 9 finishing up to week 13. I won't spend much time on any one slide, but you could go back then and see what notes we had on the board. So this leads us all the way up to Thanksgiving. So we covered Tuesday the 31st, EIGRP basics, and we looked at what features. So then we focused on EIGRP. And this is just from the board. We start talking about sharing networks, and in here we were talking about, you know, when you have the feasible distance to, then we talk about, do we have a backup to that feasible route, or a feasible backup to the route, and we talked about all that. I'm not gonna, we'd be here forever. I did run through how class addresses work. Class A address has a 0 here. Class B always has a 1 and a 0. Class C has a 1, 1 and 0. And Class D has a 1, 1, 1 and a 0. Even though we're moved away from classful addressing, it was a great idea at first in terms of the internet and addressing, until they ran out of addresses. Good. Tuesday, again, we're talking about, we did EIGRP labs, we did troubleshooting, and then we take a look at OSPF next. Distance vector, length state. This is also a distance vector routing protocol. Started OSPF on the 9th. Did single area first. Tuesday, more topics. OSPF, worked on the lab with IP6. We also have been spending a little time on the multi-layered switches from midterm, those on midterm. So we talked about single area, multi-area, why. We talked about the reason behind that. Talked about bandwidth, looked at a border router, looked at a scenario with these 10 networks. Talked a little bit about frame relay. Here, talking about the idea that we're on a multi-access network. We have a switch and we have these routers. And it's kind of the same thing in a frame relay cloud, even though frame relay's going away, but we'll take a look at frame relay next term. And in this, you know, they select, you know, you have all the options of exchanging OSPF between all these links. So we talked about how OSPF would handle that. Designated, if you remember, you know, one router would become the designated router, and then maybe a backup designated router. Everybody else would be druthers. The designated router then would distribute the information. Here's where we looked at an example. Alright. This multi-layered switch, you'd have to initiate the routing. Now on older versions of the iOS, notice that's a capital I. Older versions of the iOS, newer ones, this may be done This might be the default. Switch virtual interface. Okay. So we talked about doing DHCP. You'd have to do that for each one of your switch virtual interfaces, which here would depend on your VLANs, right? Create them for your VLANs. Switch port versus no switch port, and putting ports on specific VLANs. So, routing, create your switch virtual interfaces. If you're connecting to another router, you can create a routing port. You can set up DHCP for each of these networks, and then put ports on your VLANs. That's for that. Tuesday the 16th, we did more with OSPF. We're still working on OSPF. Alright, we're not going to explain this lab, but this was multi-area OSPF lab. And it really turned out to be interesting. We had, if you were to look here, we had area 0 of all these routers participating in area 0. And then we ended up this area, I'll use a different color here. This area still connected to area 0. Connected to area 0. And then these were separate areas. And then what happened, we created a separate area out here which wasn't connected to area 0. And we would need some kind of pass-through in order to get that to work. But this one, this whole thing here, ended up being OSPF version 4 multi-area. I redrew the diagram here and clarified the areas and the addressing. Tuesday, scaling. OSPF version 3, and we talked a little bit about next week. Let's take a look at shots of the diagram. So one group, this was pretty much right from the lab, and then we added this router, and then it had, you know, its own area out here. In fact, let me do this. This was directly from the lab. Yeah, we're okay. I'll draw some in here when we get the big picture. And so we added this one out here. The students came up with the addressing, and we adjusted the address. This one was just like the lab, but we adjusted the addressing, and the students added this addressing in between here. So we can draw this out. So area 0, just like that. Let me try to draw it a little bit better. So we had area 0, everybody in area 0, and then each of these developed their own area. Okay, and so those were all numbered separately. And the students, they should have saved the configs, and I will leave these configs so we can look at this after Thanksgiving. So on Tuesday we're going to review OSPF. We may switch this to EIGRP and review that. On Thursday next week we've got a unit test, and we work some more on OSPF troubleshooting. That is it. All caught up.